Hey guys, it's Madison and welcome to this very first monthly recap from the year 2025. Yes, that is correct. This year I am switching it up and changing from quarterly recaps the past few years to this year trying out doing month by month recaps instead for my language learning. There's a couple of reasons for this. Number one, I think that doing it month by month will help me actually remember what happened in that month a little more easily than remembering what happened 3 months ago. Better describe what I was doing during the month, why I was doing it, and what I was feeling as I was doing those things, versus trying to recall my thoughts and feelings and emotions from months earlier. And the other reason for this is that I think it really fits into my kind of overall vision for this year, which is to have kind of monthly goals or themes for each month. And so I think having a theme for each month and then making a recap at the end of the month and kind of analyzing how that month went will work out really well together. So yeah, that is generally why. And also I kind of want my recaps to be a little more interesting than just looking at graphs all the time. Yes, I am a stats and graphs and charts nerd, but I think it'd be more fun if my videos contain more than just the charts showing how many hours and what percent is Korean, Mandarin, Japanese, all that stuff. I think it's a little more fun to go beyond that and dive a little bit deeper into what I was doing and how I was feeling each month. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into this first recap for the first month of the year. First of all, like I mentioned, I'm setting kind of themes or goals for each month. And so my theme for this month, I actually couldn't really decide. I didn't have like a strong inclination for a certain theme for this month in particular. And so I kind of decided on 3 different themes all at once. And my 3 themes were rest, productivity, and politics. Now the first 2 might seem like they don't go together, but let me explain real quick. Basically, rest was I wanted to actually get enough sleep for the entire month if possible. Like I mentioned in my yearly recap for last year, I spent a good chunk of 2024 just not having enough sleep, being very sleep deprived and just overall exhausted for a good chunk of the days of the year, which is not a fun way to live, honestly. And so I wanted to start out this year strong and get a good amount of sleep throughout the month of January if possible. So a huge part of working towards that goal was me not setting alarms. I'm the kind of person who usually, even on vacation, I will set an alarm for the time that I hope to get up the next morning just to try and stay on some semblance of some sort of sleep schedule. But this month I resolved to not do that and just sleep until it was time to wake up. However, I think this kind of goal theme was kind of ruined by my dog, honestly, because my room has a big window that shows the outside, and in the morning she will come into my room, greet me, and then sit on my bed and watch out the window, or sometimes sit on my lap and watch out the window. And so when I'm trying to sleep and my dog is, jumping on my bed and trying to greet me, it is kind of an unfortunate wake-up call whether or not I want to sleep beyond that. And so because of that, I didn't necessarily get the amount of sleep that I wanted to for most of the days of the month, because that is almost a daily occurrence. And so unfortunately, even though I didn't set my phone alarm, I still have a dog alarm. And so unfortunately, the rest goal theme was kind of not as successful as I had hoped. The next kind of theme or goal was productivity, and that was basically because I am on vacation currently in the States before the next semester starts in this month, February. I have this habit of when I am here visiting family, kind of turning into just a very unproductive person. Like I'll hang out with family and eat with them, talk with them, do stuff like that. But also I still have plenty of hours in the day where I could still be working on goals that I have, whether it's language stuff or completely unrelated stuff. Like I've had things I wanted to work on that are more like career related that I've hope to work on several vacations from school now, and I have not once ever touched them, and so I still have not completed that to this day. I did have a few weeks where I was kind of spending a good chunk of hours every single day working on something that I wanted to. So I wasn't a total failure, but I wasn't as much of a success as I had hoped to, and I still didn't touch some of the projects that I hoped to touch. And so kind of half and half for that goal for the month. And then finally was politics, which is very against who I normally am. I'm not a huge fan of politics in general. I don't like listening to it, talking about it. I hate all of it usually. But because of the situation about martial law, where President Yoon tried to enact martial law in like the middle of the night in December. Because for most of the year I am living in Korea, I did kind of want to have a general awareness of all the things that went down from the time that he announced martial law to his impeachment and the next president and all that stuff. So I was hoping throughout the month to catch up on old news broadcasts from that time. And so because I did have that goal, I decided to set my overall language theme for the month as being politics stuff. Primarily, again, just news stuff, but if I had other media like a book or a movie or drama or whatever that was also politics-y, I could tie it in as well to that same theme. So that was kind of my thoughts there. And as I go through how the month went, I will kind of point back to this theme and how successful I was as I go through the individual items, but overall I'd say I was pretty successful here as well. So those are my overall kind of 3 themes for the month, and trust me, it's not always going to be 3. Usually it's only going to be just 1 goal or theme for the month, but again, I was very indecisive this month, and so I just did 3 things, and in the end only 1 was actually languagey, really. I guess productivity could also be tied to languages, but anyway, politics was the main language theme for the month. But moving on to what I actually did during the month, and that brings me to another kind of new thing I'm trying out this month, which is a monthly bingo board. I actually tried this for April, I believe, last year, and I kind of enjoyed having it. I'd actually forgotten about it, and then I watched one of my old videos from last year and saw it, and I was like, that's a good idea. I should try that again this year. So I think I'm going to try, at least for now, every month to have this bingo board to just kind of inspire me to, number 1, work towards the goals that I have for that month or this year overall, or number 2, just to kind of inspire me to get out of the same old habits of using the exact same 3 resources every single day, that kind of stuff. So hopefully will kind of inspire me to try out different things and do activities that I don't always do as often as I'd like to, by having it reminding me there on the bingo board that I will pull up and look at throughout the month when I'm trying to figure out what I should study or do that day. So that was the inspiration behind this, but let's go ahead and take a look at the bingo board for January. So here it is. I actually made this around halfway through the month when I thought of this idea, and so I already had a good kind of idea of the theme for the month that I wanted to do, which was politics, which is why there's so many news broadcasts on this bingo board. Obviously, each month I'm going to mix it up and change up at least some of the things on this bingo board. And also real quick before I kind of go over what I did and didn't accomplish on this bingo board, the other reason I like this as compared to what I typically do, just kind of tracking what I've done for the month, is whereas usually in these recaps I'm just talking about the amount of hours I spent on stuff versus what I actually accomplished. This is more on completing tasks or doing things a certain number of days during the month. And so I think it's kind of fun to have more of a accomplishment focused goal setting thing versus just always talking about time spent on stuff. So that is another reason I wanted to try this out, but let's go ahead and talk about what I actually accomplished from this bingo board, starting out with the news, which again was kind of my biggest goal and theme going into this month. And I ended up watching 10 kind of daily news broadcasts from the channel that I usually watch news from this month. And each one, typically on a weekday, it's an hour long, and on the weekends, it's like maybe 30 to 40 minutes long. I think 30 perhaps. But after the martial law incident, they actually did a lot of like special newsrooms where it was actually much longer than usual. And so most of them were an hour or longer, sometimes even up to like 2 hours long. And so it definitely took a lot longer than it usually would to watch the daily news from December when everything was going down. And so I kind of watched from the days after the incident to kind of see how things played out and how we got to the results that I know happened. So it's been pretty interesting. And at the beginning of the month, I did a lot of more kind of active watching the news. And so I learned a lot of vocab by looking things up, like treason, impeachment, all those kind of words that I don't usually come across my lexicon, you know, but definitely they did throughout this series of news broadcasts for sure, because that was kind of the main theme of all the conversation of these news broadcasts. But then after the first few days of more actively watching the news, it started to get a bit repetitive. You know, they were kind of rehashing the same stuff for a very long time, so I didn't feel the need to like intensively sit and stare at the screen and listen for the entirety of the long broadcast. And so instead I would do more passively listening to the news while I was doing puzzles for the most part. And so that was a way to kind of incorporate the politics and news into a more fun activity on the side, where I was still getting the gist of what was happening without necessarily having to like stare at the screen and listen for, you know, hours upon hours of basically the same story in a lot of detail. So that was what I did by the end of the month. And again, I am very happy. I didn't watch all 12 that I had hoped to watch throughout the month, so I only crossed off 5 out of the 6 squares. But again, I'm still very happy with this, and I think I really worked towards that politics goal that I had for this month. Next up for the bingo board, I did manage to complete a Do Chinese story. As you might have seen from the last vlog or two, I read The Fighting Cricket, I believe it's called. It's an intermediate story on Do Chinese, and it was okay, not the best story, but definitely a decent read for sure. And it really had a lot of new vocab for me, which I was pretty happy about, because oftentimes with these intermediate stories, there's not a ton of new vocab that I'm experiencing as I'm reading through them, and so I was glad that at least in this story, I definitely had a few new words that I was not very familiar with or completely unfamiliar with, so that was good. And after completing this story, I actually only have 4 more intermediate level stories to read on Do Chinese, which is very exciting. That means I've read 17 out of 21 available stories, at least so far, on the Do Chinese app, so definitely getting close to finishing that level and moving on to upper intermediate, which is very exciting. The next task that I accomplished was to actively study Japanese for at least 5 days out of the month, and I was actually quite surprised when I was looking at the data at the end of the month that I had achieved this goal, because I had thought that I hadn't done any Japanese until like the 24th or 25th of the month, and that I had not gotten 5 days total, but I'd forgotten that early in the month I actually did a few days of Saturday Reader before I let my yearly subscription expire, and so I actually did meet the goal. So yay, I did do 5 days of actively studying reading in Japanese, so I'm very happy about that. And speaking of Japanese, I also achieved the task of watching a drama or movie in Japanese this month. This one I waited till the very end of the month, and I was looking at this bingo board and I was like, let me do a few more things in the last 2 days here, and on the very last day of the month, I watched a movie in Japanese. I'd wanted to watch a Studio Ghibli film, and I was planning on watching one called Ponyo, I believe, because that's one that I've heard the name tossed around before, but when I typed in Studio Ghibli on Netflix, there was actually only one title available. I guess in Korea there's a lot more usually, because in the past when I've done the same thing, a lot more options pop up, including Ponyo, but this time, because I am in the States currently, only one popped up, and I guess I could have turned on my VPN on my computer and access the titles that are available in Korea, but I just thought maybe it's fate, I should watch this one that's available in the US right now, and so I clicked on it, going in knowing absolutely nothing, and it was called Grave of the Fireflies, and oh my gosh, usually when you think of Studio Ghibli, I think of like cute, lighthearted, fun, easy to watch shows, but this movie, I sat there for the entire hour and a half and just cried through the entire movie. It was so depressing. So that totally took me by surprise. I actually was like just taking a break for an hour or so and thought, oh, I'll just go ahead and throw on a light, fun film to watch, and this was not that. It was, I guess it was good. It feels weird to call such a sad, depressing movie good, but, you know, they did what they accomplished to do. They made me cry for an hour and a half, so I guess mission accomplished. It was about Japan and like one boy and his family right after his city is bombed during World War II, and so obviously kind of starting with a heavy topic, and it was just so depressing the entire movie. So now I know that Studio Ghibli apparently branches out from just cute, light, fun films to also have total heart-wrenchers and depressing films as well. So next time I think I might look into a bit more of what the genre of the movie is before I just blindly click on one, I guess, when I'm just in the middle of taking a quick break from working on other things, so I'm not so blindsided by a very, very sad tale. The next task I accomplished is watching a Korean drama. Technically what I actually did is I actually only watched the last 2 episodes of a drama that I had started in December, but that's actually what I was thinking of when I made this square on this board, so I'm counting it for sure because that was the intention behind this goal. And this drama actually also had kind of political tangential things as well, so I thought it fit in with the theme of the month, politics. The politics themselves were not central to the plot necessarily, but one of the main characters was the press secretary for the president, and his father also wanted to be president after the next election. So while that had an impact on the main romance story, it definitely was not the center of the story. Another kind of dramatic thing happening was definitely the center of the story. So yeah, accomplished that. The next task that I accomplished was to read something on Yomu Yomu, which I did. I read a few things. Some of them were caught on the vlogs that I shot earlier this month. And interestingly, in the few days between the time that I shot my last vlog on this channel, which was like the very end of January, like the 25th or 26th, I believe, and the next time that I tried to read on that site, which was like the 29th or 30th, they actually completely went from being able to access everything for free to finally officially going under their freemium subscription style service that I knew they were eventually going to do, because this is the sister company to Do Chinese, which I currently subscribe to. And so I knew after they kind of made enough content, they were going to follow in the path of their sister app and make everything freemium, which means that all of the normal articles you can read for the first few days after they're published, but then after that they're put behind a paywall and you have to actually subscribe to gain access to all of the content on the site. And so the story that I was in the middle of reading in the last vlog actually is not available to me anymore, but again, it was pretty easy for me. So instead, the last few days, I just kind of read a few of the free, not behind the paywall yet, articles that were available in the kind of beginner elementary levels on the website. For now, I'm not going to become a subscriber to all of their content just because I don't really feel the need to currently. I think I'm going to just use their free available content as it kind of pops up every week or so on that website. So that's my plan for now. We'll see if that changes in the future. So those are all the things that I managed to successfully accomplish this month from this bingo board. Very quickly, I will touch on the things I did not manage to do. Number one, Mandarin grammar. I'd hoped to, I just never actually got around to it. It's kind of a quick thing to do, just one afternoon. I just never actually sat down to do it, unfortunately. Same thing with writing. I just never really got around to sit down and type up anything, unfortunately. I have a plan for how to incorporate writing more into my daily routine once I go back to Korea and have access to my language planner, but unfortunately right now I don't have it. So yeah, while I was hoping to type something up this month, I just never got around to it. Next, the intensive reading for Korean. I did make some progress in the book that I'm currently trying to intensively read all the way through, but I did not read quite to the halfway mark yet, unfortunately, so I'm not going to mark this as complete, but I am still pretty satisfied with what I did manage to accomplish this month. And I think that half the book might have been a bit of a overly confident goal, shall we say. So I'm still pretty happy, even though I didn't necessarily manage to check this off this month. And then last but not least, I did not manage to complete a Korean novel either. I did start 2 books. One is intensive reading that I've just mentioned. The other one I showed in the few vlogs here as well, and I DNF'd it in my last vlog. So you can watch that if you're curious why, but I'm not going to be continuing that book any further. And so even though I did a decent amount of reading this month, honestly, I did not actually manage to read a full novel. So hopefully starting next month, I can actually finish a book and make progress towards my goal to read 25 books this year. We shall see. So that was my bingo board for January. I did manage to get 2 bingos at the very least, and my goal is not necessarily to always get a blackout and get every single thing on the whole board. That would be great if I managed to do that one month, but the goal is more to just kind of give me inspiration and motivation to work on certain things at some point in the month when I'm looking to see what I should work on. So it's motivation, not a requirement, despite my perfectionist brain trying to make it one sometimes. Next up, very briefly, I thought it'd be kind of fun if I mentioned kind of some notable media that I encountered in the month. And by media, I primarily mean shows that I'm watching or movies that I'm watching, and so that's what I'm going to focus on for this section of this video. I think the most notable thing about the media that I watched this month is how little there was. I didn't binge watch anything this month. Normally on vacation I will at least, kind of make my way through a few shows, but this month was very, very empty in terms of stuff that I watched, except for news, of course, which I already mentioned, but apart from that news, I did watch a few little things here and there. First of all, for Korean, I watched a movie called 12/12 Today. I mentioned this in my last vlog. You can watch that if you want to know more about that, but it was on the politics theme as well. It was about a similar martial law thing that happened in December. Well, there are similarities. It's not that similar necessarily, but there are some similarities. And so that was fun to watch with my family a few weeks ago. And that was really good, like I said in that vlog. So recommend that. Also, like I already mentioned on the bingo board, I watched the last 2 episodes of When the Phone Rings, which I also recommend. It was a pretty good kind of typical romantic Korean comedy. The last episode did kind of take a really, really dumb turn for a little while, but thankfully it didn't stay in that really dumb area for too long. It made no sense, but thankfully it was short. So other than that, it was a very, typical good Korean romantic drama. So occasionally a bit cliche, but I like cliche typical romantic dramas, and so I really enjoyed it. And one kind of unique thing about the drama actually was that one of the main characters, the female romantic lead, was a sign language interpreter. So I thought it was really cool to see Korean sign language kind of highlighted in the media, which I don't normally see outside of just someone interpreting the news into Korean Sign Language, so that part was interesting for sure. For Mandarin media, I watched absolutely nothing, unfortunately. But for Japanese media, I did, like I said, on the last day, watch that Studio Ghibli film, Grave of the Fireflies, which, like I said, very, 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 very sad. If you want to cry, watch this drama and you will just cry for an hour and a half if you're like me. And now after all of that, I'm now going to get into my kind of time charts that I always show in my recaps. So here we go. I'm going to be pretty brief since I already kind of went through everything I did this month, but here is the total time that I spent this month. Because of the fact that I did not watch a ton of dramas this month, my numbers stayed pretty low overall, but it was relatively consistent throughout the month as well. Even though I did have a few little periods of no activity, overall I'm pretty happy with how consistent I was, considering again, it is a vacation month and often I tend to be very unproductive and do very little in these months. I'm pretty happy with what I did manage to do. And as you can see by this language breakdown, Korean was by far the strongest language this month because I was doing a lot of reading in Korean, doing a lot of news watching in Korean, and so definitely the strongest language in terms of time spent by far. And in the corner there, you can see it's just 34 hours and 33 minutes this month, which is much lower than many of the months that I have typically, but honestly, I'm still pretty happy with that number. It's lower just because I didn't watch very many dramas, but because I managed to accomplish a lot of things that I was hoping to work towards, I'm still, like I said, very satisfied with what I managed to do. Next, looking at the active time for the month, it's not actually that remarkably different from the total time. The only difference is I removed the few movies that I watched and the news that was more passive watching versus the active watching I did. Other than those few news breakdowns I did, almost all of this is reading and vocab review from Reading for all of my languages, so pretty happy with that. Honestly, it's one of my biggest goals right now to work on reading in my Korean especially, so very happy with the amount of time I spent towards that this month. And looking at the language breakdown, you can see Korean is still obviously the strong lead. I am very glad that I did manage to study all 3 languages on at least a few days this month. And as you can see again in the corner, I did just under 20 hours of active time this month, which again I am pretty satisfied with, all things considered. Alright, we've reached the end of this longer than expected video. A few final quick thoughts. First of all, I think my language theme of politics was a pretty smashing success for what I expected. Honestly, I watched a lot of news, did a few other kind of tangentially related movie watching and drama watching as well, so that was pretty fun to do. And then secondly and finally, I really hope that as we move into the future months of this year, that kind of taking this monthly approach and setting themes, goals, reviewing it at the end of the month will really help me be more kind of motivated and inspired to work on languages throughout the entire course of this year and not have kind of slumps like last year. So only time will tell, but I'm hopeful for the rest of this year. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching to the very end. I will see you guys in the next one, and until then, annyeong.